Welcome to Hey Podcasters, where we bring live discussion with our podcasters' guests, find answers, and gain new answers to some of the most challenging questions about podcasting. We believe it's the best way to get tips and learn.
Hi, everybody. Margo Lovett here, back with another podcaster. You know, we are celebrating podcasters all of the month of September. And wow, I have September Smith here. She is a podcaster. The name of her podcast is She's All That Video Podcast Conversations with Women Doing Awesome Shit. I love that title. Welcome, September.
Thank you so much, Margo. It is really fun to be here and talk podcast with you. And thank you also for doing this month-long celebration of podcasters and podcasting.
Oh, man. I think that we are so worth it. You are bringing today another side of podcasting that nobody's talking about, really. And you are a podcaster, but you also coach, teach people about media. We are media, and how do you interact with that? How do you make it work in your favor? So first of all, take us back to your online presence. When did all of this begin for you?
It began probably back in 2005. Even at that time, I was designing online content, in particular online education programs, that kind of thing. And it was early days for that stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was, how do you get your ideas? How do you get your message out there on this new online platform? And how do you get it out there in a way that really penetrates and people hear it and you engage people? And so back in 2005, for that purpose, I had to teach myself audio so I could do my own audio production. And that was really impactful and people were loving that. But then video kind of became de rigueur. So I had to pull that on. So doing that. And that was initially working first for a university and then for the military, but then I ended up in 2010 creating my own business to do this, to be working with initially government organizations, but then with entrepreneurs, like wow. whatever it is their goals were, how do we create something that gets your message out in whatever modality is right for you, but also for your audience.
Wow, it takes skill. Everybody thinks that they know how to do that, but they really, really don't. I had no idea that you did this with government agencies. What was that like? I know I digress, but hey, I'm curious about that. What was that like?
Unfortunately, that was not probably one of the more pleasurable things to have to do, because in that way, there's a lot of institutional, bureaucratic hierarchy, and everyone's afraid to step over the line and to mix up policy, and everybody else. There's a lot of people also want to be able to get their next promotion out of whatever project it is. So it ends up a lot of times, don't tell anybody, but a lot of times it just ends up being a bland, ineffective mishmash of what it was supposed to be. So that is actually why, and the military wasn't too different. So that is actually why I ended up just going, no, I want to be working with people who have the same goal that I do. And that's not next month's promotion or making sure that I get my name on the memo list of people who contributed. The people I want to work with are people who know the goal of this is to get this message out there and have it make an enormous impact and get it out to the people who need to hear it and make a change. So that's why I work with entrepreneurs and social impact leaders.
Gosh, so you went from the valley of death to life, real good life.
It took me long enough to figure it out.
Well, you know, you figured it out and you're doing it in grand style. What can I say?
Thank you.
Media training. You did hosted a fabulous webinar last month. Well, or maybe in August you hosted.
Yes, it was August.
It was fabulous.
Oh,
Will you take us? Oh, I got two pages of notes. I really, really did. You give people information that they can use right now, or at least think about it and build towards it. So now, why shouldn't we think of ourselves, podcasters, as media when we really are? What's your take on that?
We definitely should. The reason I came to that and what I brought out in that webinar, and I was actually just talking about this morning on a live, was the fact that podcasts are not social media. Like, just pause and think about that. A lot of people who are using for their businesses, they're creating content on a daily basis, and the social media channels have us on a bit of a treadmill where we're just like going as fast as we can, creating content, it's all about consistency. It's like, oh, I'm going to have just like collapse and exhaustion. Sometimes I think of it as like the Matrix, where we're all just those baby pods and we're just feeding this system with all this content it's demanding. And as I showed in that webinar, the social media content disappears so rapidly. With some of the numbers, the quickest to evaporate is Twitter at 18 minutes.
Wow.
On average, Facebook content you put up there has a longevity of 5 hours. And that was an estimate from 3 years ago. And I can well imagine it's shorter now than it was. And it goes down the line to the point where basically the things we use, LinkedIn, YouTube, that sort of thing, you're lucky if you get a couple of days or a couple of weeks out of it. Yeah. Podcasting is around for years. 5 years. You can still find active podcast episodes that are just as freely available when you put in your search terms as you could find something that went out today. I think of podcasting and the podcast distribution platforms that it's out on, some of the biggest platforms on the planet. I think of them as almost like Netflix for audio. Yes. It's not social media. Social media is a two-way exchange, bit of a dumpster fire these days, because everybody's on there. They want to be less consuming and more talk. They're talking over each other. No one is listening. And if you're somebody that needs to get your message out, you have to be where people are listening. And podcast platforms are that. Yes. And they are one-way broadcast media. They are a parallel to television. We have to think about that as somebody, as a podcaster ourselves, but also as somebody who wants to utilize podcasts in forms of either as an advertiser or as a podcast guest. This is valuable content that you are co-creating with your host. Yeah. That is going to be out there working for both of you for years to come if you leverage it right, if you know what you're doing and you leverage it right. So yeah, podcasting, I've had people say to me like, well, I'm all over social media. I do lives. I have a group, but like, I'm too busy. Why should I do that? It's a whole other thing. It's a whole other world. You got to start diversifying, because in the last year, on average, advertising cost has doubled for social media platforms. And our reach is just like dwindling to almost nothing.
Yes, it is.
You got to diversify where you're putting your content and where people can find you. Yes. And podcasts are an amazing free for now option.
Wow. I love the stats. I mean, my eyes got real big when you gave us those stats during your webinar, because so many people are just all day, all night feeding social media. And it looks like you will just kill yourself getting nowhere. And then you're up against the algorithm.
Yes.
Oh my God.
We're slaves to the algorithm. Like,
we are. We really, and I think that it's worse on Facebook. LinkedIn, you have a bigger shot, but I see something happening over there also. So,
well, I actually just, my latest guest on my latest episode she's a specialist in LinkedIn business pages. Oh. And we recorded her episode on July 1st. And by the middle of August, 18 million more people had come on board LinkedIn. It grew by 18 million. That's like half of the population of Canada. That's joined amazing. LinkedIn in a month and a half.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah. So it is going to change the nature of LinkedIn.
Okay. So we best stay on top of that. You tell people these stats, I mean, this is information that we need to use, and we need to, as we're building out our podcast, we need to be aware of this so that we know where to put our energy, our money, because content is money. I mean, do we just throw that out the door? So we say that we want to go ahead and deepen our footprint. We say that social media's lifespan is really super short. So if a podcast is around for years, 5 years, evergreen, how do we maximize this cross-pollination or even guesting? What are your thoughts on us guesting to be around?
Guesting. I'm all about guesting as much as I'm a podcaster myself. And I love having my own show. And I mean, it's time consuming. It's a ton of work, as you and I both know.
Yeah.
But it's so satisfying. But I look at a lot of businesses, and if you don't have a ton of time and you don't have a ton of resources, and if you don't know anything about planning an episode or the strategy around your episode, your series, your season, or audio creation and production and optimization and video and all that, and creating the graphics and how to schedule inviting, it's a ton of work. If your main goal is to get out there and position yourself on an amazing platform with these feature interviews where people can come and they'll find you on a variety of shows, just out there dropping your gold and telling your brand story, why would you go to the trouble of starting a podcast?
Yeah.
If you've got, like my latest guest that I had just mentioned, she's got an ongoing content that's ever evolving. So she's a likely candidate for her own podcast. She should definitely have her own podcast because things are changing all the time. She needs to be seen as that person with her finger on the pulse. And so she's a likely candidate for a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Bless her heart. It's going to be a lot of work, but whatever. Most businesses aren't like that.
Mm-hmm.
Most businesses have one or two really solid stories that they need to get out. Save yourself all the time and the effort. It takes, my estimation is at max, 1/10 of the time to be a podcast guest and reap the benefits of an amazing episode as it does to produce it. So let them do all the work.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, podcasters. But I mean, that's their gig. They want to do it. Let them do all the work for you and collaborate to create an amazing episode with them. And then also, really, really important, collaborate on promoting it. That's really important. And that's a step that most people forget.
That was my next question. Actually, that was my second to the next question. Following that up, those steps to, everybody's not supposed to be a podcaster, but podcast guesting can really put wheels on your trailer.
Yeah.
What about podcasters? I think podcasters, we spend so much, it is a ton of work. And a lot of times we forget about flipping the mic and being a guest. And when we do, it's like, I know for myself, I'm looking like a deer in the headlights, like, this is so strange, but I like it, but this is so strange.
It is.
But we need to do more of that because we are business owners also, entrepreneurs also. Will you speak to that?
Yeah, the benefit of doing that is you've got your own show, you're growing your portfolio of episodes and what you do, and you're gathering, you're following, and people are loving tuning into you. But there are people who maybe haven't discovered you yet. And by being a podcast guest, this is a good way to be getting in front of other audiences. And also it puts you in a whole different, as you say, you're in a whole different position. I was a little bit uncomfortable as we were getting on here to do this. It's like, I'm not going to be asking the questions. So it's a little bit vulnerable. Yeah. But in my podcast, for example, 95% of my episodes are interviewing other people, which I love doing. But you could listen to 20 episodes of my podcast and you wouldn't really know much about me because I put myself in the background. Yes. I want to be the host. But my approach to being a podcast host is to be a host. I'm not there to grandstand and be marching up front with you. It's to set the stage and let you shine, which I don't know. That's not what everybody does. But if you're that kind of host where you do host a guest, then podcast guesting actually gives people a chance to see you talking about what you do and being who you are. So there is huge value there for podcast hosts to be considering doing podcast guesting as well.
I think we need to let the world see how passionate we are, how vulnerable we are. Another funny side to ourselves, how diverse we can be. Yes. Because they know us for our backgrounds, they know us for our voice, but do they really know us? They know what we post. And I think you pose a really, really important note there. When we guest, people get a chance to see another side of us and hear us from the comfort of that environment. that the host has set for us. It's really
Yes.
pretty cool.
Yes. And that's, well, one thing that I thought that was sparked when you were saying that is like my approach to hosting is I'm wearing a red shirt today. I never wear anything but white because I don't want to do anything to distract from my guest. I want to just be as anonymous as possible and visually undistracting. And when you're on somebody else's show, yes, the real you comes forward. I never use humor. Well, I sometimes use humor, but for the most part, I don't use humor so much in my show because it's like, well, if it's a serious topic, who am I to be turning their serious topic into a joke? So
Wow.
I have thoughts in my head, but I don't express them. But when you're actually being yourself and talking to someone as a guest, yeah, much more of you comes out.
Yeah. I never thought about the colors. I just always go for what makes me feel good so I can be relaxed and give that good energy towards people. I never think about just the plain white.
There's also a whole lot less to think about if you always wear a white shirt.
Well,
Me and Steve Jobs, same approach.
Hey, if it works, don't break it. Just keep riding it. What's your take on, since we're media and we're guesting, what's your take on media kits? Should we have them? Some people don't know about them and they're podcasters.
Yeah, you should definitely have one. Definitely. Myself, for my own show, I kind of choose my guests. I have twice chosen guests based on media kits. And I wouldn't strictly do that anymore. I mean, a media kit is a great thing that is like a nice little condensed composite bit of this is who you are and this is why you're amazing and this is why you'd be really great on this show. And here's some examples of what you do. And there's a headshot and there's the sound of you. And so that's great. It's like a little entree. People get a taste of who you are. Myself, that would just kind of start my journey because I'd want to go and like find videos of you and scope you out and see what your vibe is. Gotcha. But when it comes to something like an event, if something comes up really suddenly, be it a podcast opportunity or be it a summit or, you're being asked to be on a panel or a speaker, but somebody doesn't know you. If you've got your one sheet, your media kit ready, and you can pop that over to them, you've got a much greater chance of now being able to avail yourself of that opportunity. So yeah, it's a really, really important thing to have ready.
Okay. Wow,
and up to date.
Up to date. That's for certain. What about press releases? I know I'm digging a little bit deeper because I don't want people to think that I know that we are media. I don't want them to think that we are PR. Mm-hmm. So should podcasters have a press release?
I know that there are some podcasts who actually use press releases. I actually have a guest expert who will be in my program next month, and that's one of the things she's all about. She's a master publicity strategist, and press releases are part of what she includes in what she does. I would think your press release. Now, I'm just thinking of my podcast. My press release would probably, if I was to use one, would be less about my show and more about either an exciting guest that I have on or an important issue that we're covering, a very timely, important issue that probably would get traction with press. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you can have one static press release.
Okay.
I think you have to kind of maybe have the framework for it, but be nimble, be agile, and be ready to cobble something together if you can imagine it to be, yes, this is something my local press or even national press would want to consume.
That's a good idea because I kind of wondered, I never could get it together in my mind how you could have a static, standard, go-to press release because things are always changing. I mean, they'll change by the week. So I just thought I'd ask.
Same as your pitch. That's got to be, you can have a framework, but it's just a framework. You've got to customize it for the situation because both with a press release and with your pitch, it's got to be appealing. Yes. You've got to have something in there that hooks people when they see it. And usually that is because it totally aligns with what they're doing or what's happening right now. So yeah, you can't just like be throwing out the same static document to everybody and expecting it to really go anywhere.
Gotcha.
get you where you want to go.
Gotcha. This is all about, and I know we're concentrating on media. I just have one final question. Then we're going to come on back out to just some of your favorite podcast episodes. Last question about media, because you know this stuff, and people need, new podcasters in particular, I think need to know this. And those of us who've been doing it for a while, we need to, but this is kind of like a refresher for us. So I think you touched on it earlier, but when it comes to promoting a podcast, an episode, you've guessed it, or you have somebody on your show, who is responsible for promoting that podcast? I've heard them, I've heard you.
Who stands to benefit? That you can answer with that question. Who stands to benefit? If you want to benefit from this thing, you better be part of the promotion. You can trust it to them, but it's likely not going to go the way you want it to go. You have to have some control, and you want to have some input for more than one reason. This is your PR. This is content that features you if you're a guest. This is content that is positioning you as an expert in your field. Do you know how much it would cost you if you needed to go buy that? It starts at about $1,000, and anything I've seen that you pay $1,000 for looks like crap.
Me too.
This is free media content. Treat it as such. This is worth thousands and thousands of dollars. So when this drops, don't just go like assume somebody else is going to spin this into something. You've got to have this one. And it depends on the individual, depends on how you operate, what you're using for social media, but also, do you have a website? Whatever collateral you've got, how does it work with what you've got? It should definitely be on your website. It should be out there in like a media profile page, if that's what you want to do. And you have to be judicious with that too. Don't have every single podcast you've ever been on out there, because that's just like, ugh, what? No, just put the ones you really want to focus on. And you can have it on your website, have it on your social media, but also collaborate with the host when it comes to, and or the production team. When they're putting that out, find out what channels they're going to be promoting it on. Make sure you're connected to them. If they have a YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe to their channel, because that's telling YouTube that is the kind of content you're interested in, but also your lookalike audience is interested in that, which is, in a very small way, driving more audience to your content.
Yes.
And getting in there when it's, say, if it is on YouTube, commenting, dropping your comments in there. And if anybody, be it on YouTube or any other piece of social media, ever comments about the content or asks a question, you have to be in there and you have to answer those questions, because if you're a business person and you want people to connect with you, and let's be frank, hopefully, maybe become a client or a customer. If somebody showed enough interest to write a comment or a question about what you do or what you have to show them that you're out there. Yes, this is what I do. Yes, I can help you, and show more of yourself. So that you seem like a plausible solution to the problem that they're seeking to solve. So that's one thing. This whole, when your episode drops, what you have to do in that week is something that a lot of people miss. And you do that at your peril, because unlike social media, your podcast episodes are not nearly as throttled. The social media pay-to-play model, really, as we know, it's whoever pays is going to get their stuff seen for the most part, or whoever's been feeding the beast more efficiently than the others is going to get seen. Podcast is much more egalitarian that way. But still, if something's getting 1,000 downloads as opposed to 10, it is going to possibly come up first in the search results. So that first week of both of your podcast, but also of your YouTube video, is really important, that you make sure that gets some action happening on that you get to share it with your friends, with your network, say something about it on social media, and don't just say, thank you for having me. Sorry, I shouldn't say it that way.
I love it.
Don't just say, thanks for having me on your podcast, and then post that and walk away. Tell us why that podcast was interesting. Tell us what was the revelation for you in that conversation with the host, because that's kind of like shining a light on what got talked about, which is enticing, and people might want to read it more, or, consume the podcast or the video. But you're also doing your host a favor.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you are the guest.
Wow.
So you have to kind of reciprocate with some appreciation for their hospitality. And so that sounds all very onerous. But on the other side of things, one of the best reasons for being a podcast guest is the networking opportunities that you have. Networking with the host of your show. I think of it as raindrops running down a windscreen in a car, one little drop. But when it hits another little drop, it gets bigger and it picks up momentum, and then it hits more drops and it gets bigger, and then it's a rushing torrent.
Yes.
You are growing your network. You are connecting with other elements of momentum.
Mm.
Why would you just like sit back and not get involved with that? So, okay, stepping down off my soapbox.
People need to hear that. I can't tell you how many times I have heard someone say, "Thank you for letting me be a guest." And then
What does that mean?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I'm scrolling through either LinkedIn or, well, mostly LinkedIn, but if it's Facebook as well, and I see a picture, and I mean, yours always catches my eye.
Oh.
But then when I see if the guest has just said, like, "Thank you for letting me be a guest on your show," it doesn't let me in. It doesn't open the door and shine a light on why I should be clicking through and finding out what you talked about.
Yeah.
Put some jazz in there. Tell me why it's worth checking it out.
Well, I'm taking that on even as a podcaster, because oftentimes I get kind of lost in the weeds with social media and checking back on things. So, that follow-up, the riches is in the follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
This is good stuff for me. Good stuff for me. Let's go over here to She's All That Video Podcast, conversations with women doing awesome shit. Take us in there. I don't want to hold you. I'm looking at the time. Just take us into one of your favorite episodes. And really, at the end of the day, what is that podcast? I know you took us there, but can you take us a little deeper? What is it all about?
Well, the podcast kind of came out of the confluence of two things, and it was during the pandemic. And one was the bleak feeling of helplessness that so many of us were just wrapped up in last year. And it's not over, but like last year was dire.
Yeah.
And that combined with the powerhouse women that I was meeting in online businesses that were just like pushing through all that and having impact, changing lives, and just doing amazing stuff. And I guess it was just like my audio, video, interview, how do we craft a message self, just kind of looked at that and went, we need to start amplifying these voices and get these women's stories out here, for one, to tell their story, but as an inspiration to other people who are feeling so trapped. And like so many friends of mine that I would meet all across Canada, across the States, Australia, and the world, they just felt like tied down. Yeah. Like my life is in stasis. I'm not moving. I'm not going anywhere. And it was just depressing. So it's like, no, people are doing shit. You have to pay attention. Yeah. Look, listen to this. Listen to what she's doing. And another impetus for it was I would see these women and I would know, like, oh, honey, nobody knows the half of what you do. You're doing really, really crazy, amazing stuff. And women tend to do that. If they're doing this awesome shit, quite often, they're going to kind of keep it on the down low. Women don't tend to boldly announce their accomplishments. So I wanted to give those women a stage and also permission and invitations, like, hey, she's all that. Listen to this woman, and give them just that chance to just tell their story and facilitate it with some questions to just kind of bring the story out so people knew how amazing they were.
Kudos.
But that's what the podcast is about.
We needed that. We need that. Kudos to you, dear lady.
Oh, thank you.
I love it. I love it.
I enjoy it too. And I mean, the side benefit for me was that I was getting to talk to women and ask them questions, because I love asking questions. I was getting to ask them questions about the cool stuff that they were doing. It would make my day in the bleakest, darkest hours of the pandemic back last winter.
Gotcha.
It'd be a highlight in my day or my week, talking to these women.
Gave you something else to focus on and to look forward to.
Yep.
That's
as
exactly
opposed to the dumpster fire that the news was.
Oh my God. Just afraid every day if you let it be there. Yep. It's something positive, something that is progressive. That's what you
Yes.
were bringing to people.
Yeah. And change that they were making. I mean, if I could I just tell you about a few of my favorite episodes? The first season was all about, it kind of evolved into mostly social impact, women of social impact. And there was one woman in particular, she was almost one of my inspirations. She is actually saving lives. She is changing, in her small way, she is changing the maternal mortality rate through programs that she has put together and through outreach that she was doing and stuff that she was doing for free, just because she saw the need. She knew that the education had to get out there, and that in pandemic, these pregnant women were at even a higher risk. And I mean, not inconsequentially, the United States has the highest maternal mortality rate of any developed nation.
Yes, it does.
And she's in Georgia, and it was particularly bad there. But she was so humble when you tell her story. Oh, I just teach people about how to have a baby. It's like, no, you don't. So there was that episode. There was I interviewed 2 women on Women's Day this year in Japan. And one of them, in that whole central area of Japan, there's never been a woman elected to a position of top power, be it a mayor or be it a governor. And one of these women was pushing through. She knew she had almost no chance, but she said, the next woman or the next one or the next one will walk across the small path that I created. And I interviewed them, and we got into what was going on with women, because the situation for women in Japan over the pandemic has gotten really, really bad. So they were able, the reason I love this one is because we got strategic, and they were able to take that to the television media in their city. Wonderful. And say to the television media, why is this woman, even though she's been charged and has paid fees to be a candidate, not being allowed on the stage when there are debates? And why is she not getting any media coverage? The rest of the world's watching, because in 1 week, we got over 200 downloads of this episode. And within a day, the television cameras started showing up. And within a few days, she was allowed on stage to be debating with the other candidates. So being able to use your podcast to affect change, not just in your business, but in what you're trying to achieve, is, to me, that's like score. That's the ultimate win, when you can use your podcast that way. So those are just some of my favorite episodes.
I guess so. They would be mine also. You're doing amazing work. I knew it was amazing the way you led your webinar, and the information that you imparted. But then when you come to your podcast and the genesis of it, and the work, the impact that it's made in a short amount of time, I have to give you kudos. I've just been clapping all the way through this conversation, just all the way. Thank you, Margo. Gosh, what's next? I'm looking at the time. Instead of asking what's next, I want to ask you, what information do you want to leave with a person that is thinking about starting a podcast? They're still on the fence. What can we say to that person, that woman?
That woman in particular, yeah, that is my focus. And sorry, women are my focus, because men don't need any prompting to get out there and get their voices heard. Men feel quite comfortable doing it, and kudos to you. Good for you. Good. Now, I want to encourage women to do the same thing. So if you're thinking that you have something to say and you want to get it out there, I have this bent. First of all, get analytical and figure out, do I need to have a podcast, or do I need to figure out how to start leveraging other people's podcasts? Because Forbes identified podcasts back in February of this year as being one of the biggest marketing channels for 2021 and onward.
Believe that. Yeah.
This is a way to get your message out. So figure it out. Don't question, like, should I get my message out? Get your message out. Just figure out, am I going to get it out as a host, or am I going to get it out as a guest? And then once you get that figured out, go talk to somebody like you who can teach them how to create their own podcast, or come talk to somebody like me who's going to be able to, because I'm a mechanical engineer by background. So I'm all about the systems and the processes and all the nerdy little stuff. I got all the strategy and the processes figured out for you, so that if you want to be a guest, we're going to make this pay for you. We're going to make this achieve what you need it to achieve. So that would be what I would do.
Wow. I love it. I love it. This is what I'm talking about. You're telling people, don't do it alone. Figure it out, but don't take that next step by yourself.
Can I just say, one of the reasons why you shouldn't try to do this by yourself is because unlike social media, the really terrible mistakes you make in the beginning aren't going to disappear. This shit's going to be around there for years and it will come back to bite you on the ass. Just to finish the interview with some profanity.
But you're right. Oh my God.
The worst, the absolute moment that you least expect that stuff to pop out, that embarrassing, horrible episode will be what somebody will find. So,
because you didn't want to invest in yourself and get some help.
Exactly. So all your mistakes are out there on display for years to come.
Just because it's not on your hard drive any longer, it still exists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow. September Smith. Wow. Media training. We all need that. We really, really do. And she's all that video podcast, conversations with women doing awesome shit. You, lady, are doing awesome work. You really are. Thanks for joining in today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Margo. It's been fun. As always, it's fun talking with you. Thanks so much.
Feel the same way. All right. Another great conversation, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to Hey Podcasters. That's it for this week's episode. Be sure to follow us in your favorite podcast app or connect with us on heypodcasters.com so that you don't miss our next episode. We wish you happy podcasting and see you in the next episode.